Hidden beneath the smoke and chaos of the most devastating conflict in human history lie secrets that have never seen the light of day. World War II was not just a battle between nations, but a theatre where the impossible became reality, where entire squadrons vanished without explanation, and where classified operations disappeared into the shadows of time itself. These are not the stories you learned in history class, but the chilling mysteries that even 79 years later continue to baffle investigators, historians, and military experts around the world. What you're about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about the Second World War, from ghostly aircraft that appeared on radar screens only to vanish into thin air, to secret Nazi experiments that pushed the boundaries of science and sanity, to entire military units that simply walked off the face of the earth. These mysteries are not fiction or folklore, but documented cases that have left experts scratching their heads for decades. Tonight we're diving deep into the most spine-chilling unsolved mysteries of World War II, cases so strange and unexplainable that they've spawned countless theories, government cover-ups, and investigations that continue to this day. But before we begin this journey into the unknown, you'll want to make sure you're subscribed and that notification bell is turned on, because what we're about to reveal might just change how you see history forever. The year was 1945, and the war in Europe was drawing to a close. Allied forces were pushing deeper into Nazi territory, uncovering horrors beyond imagination. But among the concentration camps and devastated cities, they stumbled upon something that defied all logic and reason. Military installations that seemed to belong more in science fiction than reality. Experiments that pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible, and evidence of projects so secret that even today classified files remain sealed in government vaults. What makes these mysteries even more chilling is that they involve real people, real military units, and real operations that were meticulously documented until the moment they simply ceased to exist. Entire bomber crews that radioed in perfect weather conditions only to never be heard from again. Naval vessels that sent their final transmissions and then vanished as if they had sailed off the edge of the world. Intelligence operations that went so deep undercover that even their handlers lost track of them. But here's what's truly terrifying about these World War II mysteries. Unlike ancient enigmas that can be dismissed as legend or folklore, these cases have paper trails, military records, radio transcripts, eyewitness testimonies, and official investigations that all lead to the same impossible conclusion. Something happened during those dark years that our understanding of history simply cannot explain. The Ghost Squadron of Flight 19. It was December 5th, 1945. The war had officially ended just months earlier, but training exercises continued as the military worked to maintain readiness in an uncertain post-war world. Flight 19, a routine training mission consisting of 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, took off from Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale in Florida. What should have been a simple 2-hour navigation exercise over the Atlantic Ocean became one of the most documented and mysterious disappearances in military history. The flight plan was straightforward. 14 experienced airmen under the command of Lieutenant Charles Taylor would fly east from Florida, conduct practice bombing runs, then return to base. Weather conditions were reported as favourable, visibility was good, and all aircraft were in perfect mechanical condition. Radio contact was maintained throughout the early stages of the flight, with routine position reports coming in exactly as expected. But then something began to go wrong. At approximately 3:15 in the afternoon, the radio transmissions from Flight 19 started to become increasingly frantic and confused. Lieutenant Taylor's voice crackled through the static, reporting that his compass was malfunctioning and that he couldn't determine their position. Even more disturbing, he stated that the ocean looked strange, unlike anything he had seen before in his years of flying over these waters. The control tower at Fort Lauderdale immediately began emergency procedures, attempting to guide the lost squadron home using radio direction finding equipment. But the transmissions from Flight 19 became increasingly bizarre. The pilots reported that all their compasses were spinning wildly, that they couldn't see land in any direction, and that the water beneath them had taken on an unnatural appearance. One transmission that still sends chills down investigators' spines came through at 4:25. "We can't find west. Everything is wrong. We can't be sure of any direction. Everything looks strange, even the ocean. What happened next defies all logical explanation." Despite multiple rescue aircraft being dispatched and an extensive search operation covering over 250,000 square miles of ocean, not a single trace of the 5 aircraft or 14 crew members was ever found. No wreckage, no oil slicks, no debris, no bodies. It was as if Flight 19 had simply flown into another dimension. But the mystery deepened even further when one of the rescue aircraft, a PBM Mariner flying boat with 13 crew members aboard, also vanished without a trace while searching for the missing squadron. This massive aircraft, equipped with the most advanced navigation and communication equipment of its time, sent one routine radio message and then disappeared completely. 2 separate incidents on the same day, involving 18 aircraft and 27 experienced military personnel, all vanishing in the same general area of the Atlantic Ocean. The official Navy investigation concluded that the disappearance was caused by pilot error and adverse weather conditions. But this explanation has been challenged by aviation experts, meteorologists, and military historians for decades. The weather reports from that day show clear skies and calm seas. The pilots were all experienced, with hundreds of hours of flight time over the Atlantic. The aircraft were in perfect mechanical condition and equipped with multiple backup navigation systems. Even more puzzling are the radio transmissions themselves. Analysis of the recorded conversations reveals that the pilots were describing conditions that simply didn't exist according to weather reports and other aircraft in the area. They spoke of being surrounded by white water, of compasses that spun without stopping, and of an ocean that looked completely different from anything they had encountered before. The disappearance of Flight 19 has spawned countless theories over the decades. Some point to electromagnetic anomalies in the area that could have interfered with navigation equipment. Others suggest that the squadron encountered some form of advanced weather phenomenon that wasn't understood in 1945. The most controversial theories involve everything from secret military experiments to extraterrestrial encounters. But regardless of what actually happened to Flight 19, the case remains one of the most thoroughly documented mysterious disappearances in military history. Every radio transmission was recorded, every search effort was logged, and every piece of evidence was preserved. Yet despite decades of investigation by military officials, aviation experts, and independent researchers, no satisfactory explanation has ever been found. The vanishing of the Nazi gold train. As Soviet forces closed in on Nazi Germany in the final months of World War II, panic spread through the highest levels of the Third Reich. Desperate to preserve their looted treasures and prevent valuable resources from falling into enemy hands, Nazi officials launched a series of secret evacuation operations designed to move gold, artwork, and classified documents to secure locations. One of these operations involved a heavily armoured train that departed from the German city of Breslau in early 1945, loaded with an estimated 300 tons of gold, precious metals, jewellery, and priceless artwork stolen from across occupied Europe. According to Nazi records discovered after the war, this train was destined for a secret underground facility in the mountains of Lower Silesia, where the treasures would be hidden until the Reich could reclaim them. But the gold train never reached its destination. Somewhere along the route through the mountainous terrain of what is now southwestern Poland, The massive locomotive and its cargo of unimaginable wealth simply vanished. No arrival was recorded at the intended destination, no wreckage was found along the tracks, and no witnesses ever came forward to describe seeing the train pass through their villages. What makes this disappearance even more mysterious is that the train was heavily guarded by elite SS troops and equipped with anti-aircraft guns to defend against Allied bombing raids. The locomotive itself was one of the most powerful in the German railway system, specifically chosen for its ability to haul the enormous weight of the treasure-laden cars through difficult terrain. This was not some light passenger train that could easily be hidden or destroyed without leaving evidence. The search for the Nazi gold train began almost immediately after the war ended. Allied intelligence services, acting on information provided by captured German officers, launched extensive investigations throughout the region. Local residents were questioned, railway records were examined, and teams of investigators combed through miles of mountainous terrain looking for any sign of the missing locomotive. Several promising leads emerged over the decades. In the 1960s, a Polish railway worker claimed to have discovered a sealed tunnel entrance that matched descriptions from captured Nazi documents. Ground-penetrating radar surveys in the 1980s detected what appeared to be large metallic objects buried beneath the forest floor, and in 2015, two treasure hunters announced that they had located the train using sophisticated scanning equipment, sparking a media frenzy and renewed official investigation. But every lead has ultimately led to disappointment. The sealed tunnel contained only empty chambers. The radar anomalies turned out to be natural rock formations, and the 2015 announcement, despite extensive excavation efforts, produced no evidence of the missing train or its precious cargo. The mystery has been complicated by the fact that the region where the train disappeared has been the subject of numerous geological surveys and mining operations over the past 70 years. If a 300-ton locomotive and several cars filled with gold were buried anywhere in the area, it seems impossible that they could have remained hidden for so long. Some investigators believe that the train never actually departed from Breslau, and that the entire story was a deliberate deception designed to confuse Allied intelligence services. Others suggest that the cargo was unloaded and hidden in multiple smaller locations before the train reached its final destination. The most intriguing theory proposes that the train was deliberately driven into an underground facility that was then sealed and camouflaged so effectively that it remains hidden to this day. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of the Nazi gold train mystery is what it represents. This was not just a valuable cargo that went missing, but a symbol of the systematic looting and cultural destruction that characterized Nazi occupation across Europe. The gold, jewelry, and artwork on that train had been stolen from Jewish families, art museums, and cultural institutions throughout occupied territories. Each piece represented not just monetary value, but irreplaceable cultural heritage and personal treasures torn from their rightful owners. The disappearance of Unit 731. In the mountains of Manchuria, far from the main theaters of World War II, the Japanese military established a network of secret research facilities dedicated to biological and chemical weapons development. Unit 731, under the command of Lieutenant General Shiro Ishii, conducted experiments so horrific that they remain classified in many government archives to this day. But as Soviet forces advanced into Japanese-occupied territory in August 1945, something unprecedented happened. The entire unit, consisting of over 3,000 researchers, technicians, guards, and support personnel, simply vanished without a trace. When Soviet troops reached the facility complex, they found empty buildings, abandoned equipment, and no sign of the massive operation that had been conducted there for nearly a decade. What makes this disappearance particularly chilling is the scale of the operation that had to be evacuated. Unit 731 wasn't just a small research team, but a massive military-industrial complex, spanning multiple buildings and employing thousands of people. The facility included laboratories, testing chambers, administrative offices, residential quarters, and even its own railway station for transporting materials and personnel. According to captured Japanese documents, the evacuation order was given just days before Soviet forces were expected to reach the area, but logistically, moving 3,000 people and destroying all evidence of their activities should have taken weeks, if not months. The fact that it was accomplished so quickly and so completely suggests a level of planning and preparation that indicates the Japanese military had been preparing for this possibility for some time. The mystery deepened when Allied investigators began interviewing Japanese prisoners of war and collaborators who had worked with Unit 731. While some individuals provided detailed information about the unit's activities and personnel, none could explain how such a massive evacuation had been accomplished or where the thousands of people involved had gone. Some former unit members eventually surfaced in post-war Japan, but their testimonies only added to the confusion. They described receiving sudden evacuation orders, being transported to collection points, and then being dispersed to various locations throughout Japan and its remaining territories, but the numbers didn't add up. Even accounting for casualties and personnel who had been transferred to other units, hundreds of people who had been documented as working at the facility were never accounted for. The investigation was further complicated by the fact that the Soviet Union classified much of what they discovered at the abandoned facility. While some information emerged during war crimes trials in the 1940s and 50s, many documents remain sealed in Russian archives to this day. This has led to speculation that the Soviets discovered something at the Unit 731 facility that they didn't want the rest of the world to know about. The most disturbing aspect of the Unit 731 disappearance involves the experimental subjects themselves. According to fragmentary records recovered from the facility, the unit had been conducting tests on thousands of prisoners of war, civilians, and political dissidents. When Soviet forces arrived, they found evidence of the experiments, but no trace of the subjects who had been held there. This raises horrifying questions about what happened during those final days before the evacuation. Were the subjects killed to eliminate witnesses? Were they transported elsewhere to continue the experiments? Or did something even more sinister occur that has been covered up by multiple governments for nearly 8 decades? Recent declassified documents from American intelligence services have revealed that several high-ranking members of Unit 731 were secretly recruited by the United States after the war, offering immunity from prosecution in exchange for their research data. But even these files contain gaps and inconsistencies that suggest important information is still being withheld. The Phantom Convoy of Operation Bernhard. Deep in the Austrian Alps, in a facility so secret that it didn't appear on any official Nazi organizational charts, a counterfeiting operation of unprecedented scale was nearing completion in the spring of 1945. Operation Bernhard, named after its mastermind SS Oberführer Bernhard Krüger, had succeeded in producing nearly perfect reproductions of British pounds and American dollars, with plans to flood Allied economies and destroy their currencies from within. But as American forces advanced through Austria, the entire operation was hastily shut down and its evidence destroyed. According to surviving records, a convoy of trucks loaded with printing plates, currency samples, and the final products of years of meticulous work departed the facility on May 2, 1945. The convoy, consisting of 12 heavily loaded vehicles and an escort of SS guards, was destined for a secure location in the Swiss Alps, where the materials would be hidden until they could be retrieved. The convoy never arrived at its destination. More mysteriously, none of the vehicles, personnel, or cargo has ever been found despite extensive searches by Allied intelligence services, treasure hunters, and Austrian authorities. The disappearance is made even more puzzling by the fact that the route to Switzerland involved crossing several Allied checkpoints and travelling through areas that were under heavy surveillance. What makes this case particularly intriguing is that several witnesses reported seeing the convoy on the night of May 2nd, but their descriptions don't match. Some described 12 trucks, others reported seeing only 6. Some witnesses claimed the vehicles were heading towards Switzerland, while others insisted they were travelling in the opposite direction. The inconsistencies suggest that either multiple convoys were operating simultaneously, or something far more unusual was taking place. The Austrian resistance movement, which had been monitoring Nazi activities in the region, reported unusual radio traffic on the night the convoy disappeared. According to their intercepts, German forces were using code words and frequencies that didn't match any known Nazi communication protocols. The transmissions stopped abruptly at 2:37 in the morning, and no further communications were detected. American intelligence officers who investigated the disappearance in the immediate aftermath of the war noted several disturbing anomalies. The facility where Operation Bernhard had been conducted showed signs of hasty evacuation, but also evidence of deliberate sabotage that went beyond normal document destruction. Machinery had been damaged in ways that suggested the operators wanted to ensure the equipment could never be reconstructed or reverse engineered. Even more puzzling was the discovery that several key personnel associated with Operation Bernhard had also vanished on the same night as the convoy. These weren't just guards or drivers, but highly skilled technicians and forgers whose expertise would have been valuable to any post-war intelligence operation. The fact that they disappeared simultaneously suggests either a coordinated escape plan or something more sinister. The disappearing prisoners of Stalag Luft III. The Great Escape from Stalag Luft III in March 1944 is one of the most famous prisoner of war stories in history. 76 Allied airmen tunneled their way out of the German prison camp in what remains the largest successful escape attempt of World War II. But what happened to the 23 escapees who were never recaptured has become one of the war's most enduring mysteries. Of the 76 men who escaped, 50 were executed by the Gestapo in violation of international law, 3 successfully made it to neutral territories, and 23 simply vanished without a trace. No bodies were found, no witnesses came forward, and no evidence of their fate has ever been discovered, despite decades of investigation by military historians and war crimes investigators. The official German records from the period show that massive manhunts were conducted throughout occupied Europe to recapture the escapees. Thousands of German soldiers, police officers, and civilian volunteers participated in the search operation. Roadblocks were established, identity checks were intensified, and rewards were offered for information leading to recaptures. Yet 23 experienced military officers, most of whom spoke little or no German and had no knowledge of the local terrain, managed to evade one of the most extensive manhunts in Nazi history. What makes their disappearance even more mysterious is that these weren't just ordinary soldiers, but highly trained aircrew members whose loss would have been keenly felt by Allied intelligence services. Several of the missing men were known to have valuable information about German air defences, aircraft technology, and military installations. Their debriefings would have been considered essential for ongoing Allied operations. The investigation into their fate was complicated by the chaos of the immediate post-war period. Many German records were destroyed, key witnesses had fled or been killed, and the territories where the escapes had taken place were now under Soviet control. When Allied investigators finally gained access to the relevant areas, they found that local populations had been displaced and many potential sources of information had been lost. Several theories have been proposed to explain what happened to the 23 missing escapees. Some historians believe they were killed by German forces, but their deaths were never officially recorded to avoid additional war crimes charges. Others suggest that they successfully made contact with resistance movements and were hidden until the end of the war, but chose not to reveal their survival for personal reasons. The most intriguing theory involves the possibility that some of the escapees were recruited by Soviet intelligence services operating in occupied territories. The timing of their disappearance coincides with increased Soviet activity behind German lines, and several of the missing men had technical knowledge that would have been valuable to Russian military planners. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this mystery is what it reveals about the systematic destruction of evidence that occurred during the final months of the war. The fact that 23 men could simply vanish without leaving any trace suggests a level of coordination and cover-up that goes beyond normal military operations. The Lost Squadron of the Mediterranean. In the azure waters of the Mediterranean Sea, where ancient civilizations once sailed and modern navies now patrol, lies one of World War II's most baffling maritime mysteries. On June 15, 1943, a squadron of 6 British destroyers departed from the port of Alexandria, Egypt, on what was classified as a routine anti-submarine patrol. The ships were under the command of Captain William Morrison, a decorated naval officer with 20 years of experience in Mediterranean operations. The squadron's mission was straightforward: patrol a designated area south of Crete, investigate reported German U-boat activity, and return to base within 72 hours. Weather conditions were excellent, the ships were in perfect mechanical condition, and radio contact was maintained throughout the first day of the operation. The last recorded transmission from Captain Morrison came at 11:45 on the evening of June 16th, reporting all ships accounted for and proceeding according to plan. But when the squadron failed to return to Alexandria on schedule, rescue operations were immediately launched. British, Greek, and even American naval forces joined in what became one of the largest search efforts in Mediterranean history. For 2 weeks, aircraft and ships combed over 50,000 square miles of ocean, investigating every possible location where the missing destroyers might have encountered trouble. The search revealed absolutely nothing: no wreckage, no survivors, no oil slicks, no debris fields. 6 modern warships, each over 300 feet long and carrying crews of more than 200 men, had simply vanished as completely as if they had never existed. The disappearance was made even more mysterious by the fact that German naval records, captured after the war, showed no U-boat activity in the area during the time period when the squadron disappeared. What makes this case particularly puzzling is that destroyer squadrons in 1943 were equipped with the most advanced communication and navigation equipment available. Each ship had multiple radio systems, radar installations, and emergency signaling devices. For all 6 vessels to suffer simultaneous equipment failures that prevented any distress calls seems statistically impossible. The British Admiralty's investigation into the disappearance was exhaustive but ultimately fruitless. Every aspect of the mission was examined, from the ship's maintenance records to the personal backgrounds of the crew members. Weather reports were analysed, German intelligence intercepts were reviewed, and surviving personnel from other operations in the area were interviewed extensively. One of the few clues that emerged came from a Greek fishing vessel that reported seeing unusual lights on the horizon on the night of June 16th. The fisherman described what appeared to be a series of bright flashes, followed by a strange green glow that lasted for several minutes before fading away. But their location was approximately 30 miles from where the British squadron should have been, according to their last radio transmission. The mystery deepened when Italian naval archives, examined after Italy's surrender in September 1943, revealed that their submarines had also detected unusual sonar contacts in the same general area during mid-June. The contacts were described as multiple large objects moving at high speed in formation, but attempts to intercept or identify them had been unsuccessful. Some naval historians have suggested that the squadron encountered a new type of German weapon that was being tested in the Mediterranean. Others propose that the ships were victims of a coordinated attack by aircraft and submarines that was so swift and devastating that no distress signals could be transmitted. The most controversial theories involve experimental technology, electromagnetic phenomena, or even extraterrestrial encounters. But regardless of what actually happened to the lost squadron of the Mediterranean, the case remains a stark reminder of how completely modern warships and their crews could disappear during the chaos of World War II. Over 1,200 experienced naval personnel, along with millions of dollars worth of military equipment, simply vanished into the depths of the Mediterranean, leaving behind only questions that have never been answered. The secret of the Amber Room evacuation. In the opulent halls of the Catherine Palace near Leningrad, one of the world's most magnificent artistic treasures faced imminent destruction as German forces advanced through the Soviet Union in 1941. The Amber Room, often called the eighth wonder of the world, consisted of over 6 tons of precious amber panels, gold leaf, and mirrors that had taken master craftsmen over a decade to complete. As the siege of Leningrad began, Soviet authorities made the desperate decision to evacuate the room's irreplaceable contents. According to fragmentary records discovered decades later, a specially trained team of curators and military personnel carefully dismantled the amber panels and packed them into wooden crates for transport to a secure location deep in the Ural Mountains. The evacuation convoy departed the Catherine Palace on September 23, 1941, consisting of 18 trucks carrying the precious cargo and an escort of NKVD guards. The route had been planned to avoid German advance units and take advantage of secondary roads through the Russian countryside. Radio contact was maintained for the first 2 days of the journey, with regular position reports indicating the convoy was proceeding on schedule. Then, somewhere in the forests between Novgorod and Vologda, the entire convoy vanished. The last radio transmission, received at 3:15 in the morning on September 26th, reported that the vehicles had stopped for mechanical repairs and would resume travel at dawn. No further communications were ever received, and when search teams reached the reported location, they found only empty forest. What makes this disappearance particularly mystifying is the logistical impossibility of hiding such a large convoy. 18 military trucks, dozens of personnel, and crates containing 6 tons of amber panels couldn't simply evaporate without leaving evidence. The vehicles alone would have required massive effort to conceal or destroy. Yet extensive searches of the area revealed no burned wreckage, no abandoned equipment, and no signs of any struggle or attack. Soviet archives, partially declassified in the 1990s, reveal that Stalin personally ordered multiple search operations to locate the missing amber panels. Entire divisions were diverted from frontline duties to comb through hundreds of square miles of forest. Local populations were interrogated, aerial reconnaissance flights were conducted, and rewards were offered for any information about the convoy's fate. The investigation uncovered several disturbing anomalies that only deepened the mystery. Railway workers reported seeing a freight train with unusual cargo passing through the area on the night the convoy disappeared, but no such train appeared on any official schedules. Local partisans intercepted German radio transmissions that mentioned a successful special operation in the region, but captured Nazi documents made no reference to any action against Soviet art evacuation efforts. Perhaps most puzzling of all were reports from multiple witnesses who claimed to have seen the convoy after its official disappearance date. A collective farm manager reported that military trucks matching the convoy's description had passed through his village on September 28, 2 days after the last radio contact. Forest workers claimed to have encountered NKVD guards who were asking directions to locations that weren't on the original evacuation route. The fate of the Amber Room's contents has spawned countless theories over the decades. Some historians believe the convoy was intercepted by German special forces who had learned of the evacuation through intelligence sources. Others suggest that Soviet officials deliberately falsified the disappearance to hide the panels in a location so secret that even Stalin wasn't informed of their true whereabouts. The most intriguing theory proposes that the convoy never actually left the Catherine Palace area and that the entire evacuation story was an elaborate deception designed to confuse German intelligence services. According to this hypothesis, the amber panels were hidden in underground chambers beneath the palace itself, where they remain to this day. But regardless of what actually happened to the Amber Room convoy, the mystery represents something far more significant than missing artwork. These panels were not just valuable objects, but symbols of centuries of Russian cultural achievement. Their disappearance struck at the heart of Soviet national identity during the country's darkest hour, when every loss felt like a step toward complete cultural annihilation. The vanishing codebreakers of Station X. Hidden in the English countryside, far from the bombing raids and military installations that marked most of World War II, a mansion called Bletchley Park housed one of the war's most crucial operations. Known only as Station X to maintain secrecy, this facility was home to the brilliant mathematicians, linguists, and cryptographers who broke the German Enigma code and changed the course of history. But in March 1944, something unprecedented occurred within the ultra-secret walls of Bletchley Park. A team of 12 senior codebreakers, working on what was classified as the most sensitive project in the entire facility, simply disappeared overnight. Their workstations were found empty, their personal belongings were gone, and their ongoing decryption projects were left incomplete, with no explanation or transition notes. What made this disappearance particularly alarming to British intelligence was that these weren't junior personnel who might have been reassigned without notice. The missing team included some of the most experienced cryptographers in the Allied war effort, individuals whose knowledge of German communication systems was considered irreplaceable. Their sudden absence left critical intelligence operations in chaos and forced the recruitment of replacement personnel who required months of training. The official explanation provided to other Station X personnel was that the team had been transferred to a new facility for specialized work. But internal memos discovered in British intelligence archives decades later reveal that senior officials had no knowledge of any such transfer. Even more disturbing, the personnel files for all 12 missing codebreakers were removed from Bletchley Park records and have never been located. Security investigations conducted immediately after the disappearance uncovered several troubling anomalies. The missing team had been working on intercepted communications that didn't match any known German military or diplomatic networks. Their project files contain references to locations and code names that appeared nowhere else in Allied intelligence databases. Most mysteriously, their work seemed to involve communications that were being transmitted on frequencies the Germans weren't supposed to have access to. One of the few clues to emerge came from a night security guard who reported seeing several black sedans parked outside the facility on the evening before the team's disappearance. The vehicles had no identifying markings and were staffed by individuals who didn't respond to his routine security challenges. When he reported the incident to his superiors the next morning, he was told that the matter was classified and that he should never discuss what he had observed. The investigation was further complicated by the discovery that the missing team's living quarters in nearby villages had also been emptied overnight. Landlords reported that their tenants had simply vanished, leaving behind paid rent and personal possessions. Local shopkeepers confirmed that the individuals had been seen going about their normal routines just days before their disappearance, with no indication that they were planning to leave. British intelligence services conducted extensive background checks on all 12 missing personnel, looking for any indication of German sympathies or security breaches. What they found only deepened the mystery. Every member of the team had impeccable credentials and had been thoroughly vetted before their assignment to Station X. Several had family members serving in combat units, making defection seem highly unlikely. The most disturbing aspect of the investigation involved the project the team had been working on before their disappearance. According to fragmentary records that survived their departure, they had been analyzing communications that suggested the existence of a German intelligence operation that was somehow obtaining classified Allied information. The intercepted messages indicated that German forces had advanced knowledge of several major Allied operations, including D-Day preparations. This raised the terrifying possibility that the missing code breakers had discovered evidence of a high-level security breach within the Allied command structure. Their disappearance could have been orchestrated to prevent this information from reaching senior military officials, or they could have been eliminated to protect a German intelligence network that had penetrated the highest levels of British government. Decades after the war ended, several individuals claiming to be relatives of the missing codebreakers came forward with stories suggesting that their family members had been recruited for even more secret operations. According to these accounts, the 12 cryptographers were transferred to facilities that were so classified that their existence was never officially acknowledged. But attempts to verify these claims have been unsuccessful, and no documentation has ever been produced to support them. The disappearance of the Station X codebreakers remains one of the most sensitive unsolved mysteries of World War II. The fact that 12 of Britain's most valuable intelligence assets could vanish without explanation suggests either a catastrophic security failure or the existence of operations so secret that they remain classified nearly 80 years after the war ended. The mystery of the Phantom Fortress. High above the cloud-covered peaks of the Bavarian Alps, Allied bomber crews reported encounters that defied every principle of aerial warfare they had been trained to understand. Beginning in late 1944, American B-17 Flying Fortress crews returning from bombing raids over Germany began describing a massive aircraft that appeared alongside their formations without warning, maintained perfect formation flying for minutes at a time, then vanished just as mysteriously as it had appeared. The aircraft, dubbed the Phantom Fortress by American air crews, was described as being identical to a standard B-17 bomber except for its unusual silver colouring and complete lack of identifying markings. No national insignia, no squadron codes, no serial numbers, nothing that would indicate which air force it belonged to or where it had originated. Even more puzzling, the aircraft never showed any signs of battle damage, despite appearing in areas where German fighters were actively engaging Allied bombers. What made these encounters particularly unnerving for Allied crews was the Phantom Fortress's behaviour. Unlike German interceptor aircraft, which attacked aggressively and then withdrew, this mysterious bomber would simply appear in formation and fly alongside Allied aircraft as if it belonged there. Radio attempts to contact the aircraft were met with silence, and it never responded to standard military identification procedures. The sightings were initially dismissed by Allied intelligence as cases of mistaken identity or combat stress affecting exhausted bomber crews. But as reports continued to accumulate from multiple squadrons operating over different areas of Germany, A pattern began to emerge that couldn't be explained by conventional means. The encounters were being reported by experienced pilots and navigators whose reliability had been proven in dozens of previous combat missions. Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson, commanding officer of the 351st Bomb Group, filed a detailed report after his formation encountered the Phantom Fortress during a raid on Munich in January 1945. According to his account, the mysterious aircraft appeared at their altitude and maintained perfect formation position for over 20 minutes, during which time German fighters attacked the formation repeatedly. The Phantom Fortress was never targeted by the German aircraft, even though it would have been an easy target. Even more disturbing were reports that the mysterious aircraft seemed to have capabilities that exceeded those of standard B-17 bombers. Several crews reported that it could accelerate and climb at rates that were impossible for the heavily loaded flying fortresses they were familiar with. Some witnesses claimed the aircraft could change direction without banking, maintaining level flight while somehow altering its course in ways that violated basic principles of aerodynamics. American intelligence services launched a classified investigation into the Phantom Fortress sightings, interviewing dozens of aircrew members and analyzing gun camera footage from bomber formations. The investigation revealed that encounters with the mysterious aircraft had been reported by crews from multiple bomb groups operating out of different bases in England and Italy. The consistency of the descriptions across different units suggested that witnesses were observing the same phenomenon. The investigation took a disturbing turn when analysts discovered that several of the bomber formations that had encountered the Phantom Fortress subsequently suffered unusually high casualty rates on later missions. Statistical analysis showed that crews who reported sightings were significantly more likely to be shot down or suffer battle damage during subsequent operations. Whether this was coincidence or evidence of some form of German intelligence gathering remained unclear. German aviation records captured after the war provided no explanation for the Phantom Fortress sightings. Luftwaffe fighter pilots who had engaged Allied bomber formations during the same time period made no mention of any unusual aircraft in their combat reports. German aircraft manufacturing records showed no evidence of any captured B-17 bombers being refurbished and put into service with Nazi forces. The mystery deepened when post-war interviews with German pilots revealed that they had also observed the mysterious aircraft during combat operations. Several Luftwaffe aces reported seeing a silver B-17 that appeared to be flying with Allied formations, but never engaged in combat and never seemed to suffer damage despite being in the middle of aerial battles. Like their Allied counterparts, German pilots found the aircraft's behavior impossible to explain. One of the most credible sightings came from Captain Robert Mitchell, a B-17 pilot with over 50 combat missions to his credit. During a bombing raid on Berlin in February 1945, Mitchell reported that the Phantom Fortress appeared directly alongside his aircraft and maintained position for the entire duration of the bomb run. He was able to observe the mysterious bomber at close range and noted that while it appeared to be a standard B-17, there were subtle differences in the engine nacelles and wing configuration that he couldn't identify. The Phantom Fortress sightings ceased abruptly in April 1945, coinciding with the final collapse of German resistance. No similar encounters were reported during the final weeks of the war in Europe, and the mysterious aircraft was never seen again after Germany's surrender. The timing of the disappearance has led some researchers to speculate that the aircraft was connected to some form of German secret weapons program that was shut down as Allied forces overran Nazi research facilities. But despite decades of investigation by military historians, aviation experts, and intelligence researchers, no satisfactory explanation for the Phantom Fortress has ever been found. The aircraft remains one of the most thoroughly documented yet completely inexplicable mysteries of the air war over Europe, a reminder that even in the most heavily studied conflict in human history, there are still phenomena that defy our understanding of what was possible during those dark and desperate years. Tonight, as we reach the end of our journey through these chilling, unsolved mysteries of World War II, we're left with more questions than answers. Each case we've explored represents not just a historical puzzle, but a stark reminder that even the most documented conflict in human history still harbors secrets that challenge our understanding of what was possible during those tumultuous years. The pattern of the impossible. What emerges from studying these mysteries together is a disturbing pattern that connects them all. Whether we're examining the vanishing of Flight 19, the disappearance of entire military units, or the phantom aircraft that defied the laws of physics, each case involves the complete absence of physical evidence despite extensive documentation of the events leading up to the disappearances. This isn't simply a matter of incomplete records or lost files. These incidents occurred during a period when military organizations were obsessively documenting every aspect of their operations. Radio transmissions were recorded, flight plans were filed in triplicate, and personnel movements were tracked with unprecedented precision. Yet somehow, entire squadrons, convoys, and research teams managed to vanish so completely that not a single trace of their fate has ever been discovered. What makes this pattern even more unsettling is the caliber of the people involved. These weren't inexperienced recruits or hastily organized operations, but elite units led by seasoned commanders using the most advanced technology available. The idea that such professional military organizations could simply cease to exist without explanation challenges our fundamental assumptions about the nature of warfare and the limits of what's possible. The fact that many of these disappearances occurred during the final months of the war adds another layer of mystery. As Nazi Germany collapsed and Allied victory became inevitable, it seems that the normal rules of military engagement somehow broke down, creating conditions where impossible things became reality. Whether this was due to desperation, secret weapons, or something far more sinister remains an open question. The technology question. One of the most intriguing aspects of these World War II mysteries involves the repeated references to technology that seem to exceed the known capabilities of the era. Witnesses described aircraft that could perform maneuvers impossible for conventional planes, communication equipment that operated on unknown frequencies, and weapon systems that produced effects unlike anything in the standard military arsenal. The question that haunts investigators is whether this advanced technology actually existed, or whether the extreme conditions of wartime somehow created illusions that made conventional equipment appear to possess impossible capabilities. The psychological stress of combat, combined with the fear and confusion of battle, could certainly explain some of the more extraordinary witness testimonies. But the sheer consistency of these reports across different theatres of operation, involving personnel who had no contact with each other, suggests that something genuine was occurring. Either multiple military organizations had developed secret technologies that were far in advance of anything publicly acknowledged, or the war created conditions that allowed phenomena beyond our current scientific understanding to manifest. The most disturbing possibility is that some of these technologies were successfully developed and deployed, but that all evidence of their existence was deliberately destroyed or classified at levels so high that they remain secret nearly 8 decades later. The idea that weapons or capabilities of such significance could be completely erased from the historical record speaks to the power of governments to control information and shape our understanding of the past. The human cost. Behind each of these mysteries lies a more personal tragedy that often gets lost in the technical details and theoretical speculation. Every disappearance represented real people with families, friends, and loved ones who were left with no closure, no explanation, and no grave to visit. The psychological toll on those left behind was immeasurable and continues to this day as relatives search for answers that may never come. The families of the missing Flight 19 crew members spent decades pushing for new investigations and demanding access to classified files. The relatives of the vanished codebreakers from Station X were told their loved ones had been transferred to other duties, only to discover years later that no record of such transfers existed. The wives and children of the disappeared research personnel were left to wonder whether their husbands and fathers had been killed, captured, or had simply chosen to abandon their previous lives. What makes these personal tragedies even more heartbreaking is the knowledge that, in many cases, military and government officials knew more than they were willing to reveal. Classified documents released decades after the war have shown that investigations into these disappearances often uncovered disturbing information that was deemed too sensitive for public disclosure. Families were left to grieve without knowing that evidence existed that might have provided at least partial answers to their questions. The impact extended beyond immediate family members to entire communities and military units. When experienced personnel vanished without explanation, their colleagues were left to wonder whether they might be next. The psychological warfare aspect of these mysterious disappearances may have been as significant as any physical damage they caused, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and fear that undermined morale and effectiveness. The classified files, perhaps the most frustrating aspect of investigating these World War II mysteries, is the knowledge that many relevant documents remain classified or have been deliberately destroyed. Government archives around the world contain files marked with security classifications that prevent their release, even though the events they describe occurred nearly 80 years ago. The justifications for maintaining this secrecy vary, but they often involve claims that disclosure would damage national security, reveal intelligence sources and methods, or compromise ongoing operations. Critics argue that these explanations are outdated and that the public has a right to know the truth about historical events, especially those that resulted in the loss of military personnel. In some cases, Freedom of Information Act requests have resulted in the release of heavily redacted documents that raise more questions than they answer. Pages of blacked-out text, missing file sections, and entire document series that are listed in indexes but marked as destroyed create a frustrating puzzle for researchers trying to piece together what actually happened. The pattern of classification and document destruction is itself revealing. The fact that so many files related to these specific incidents have been deemed too sensitive for public release suggests that they contain information that governments consider fundamentally different from routine military operations. Whether this information involves advanced technology, intelligence failures, or something even more sensitive remains a matter of speculation. Some researchers have noted that the classification patterns seem designed not just to protect specific information, but to prevent the public from understanding the full scope of what occurred during the war. By keeping related files scattered across different agencies and classification levels, authorities may have made it impossible for anyone outside the intelligence community to develop a complete picture of these mysterious events. The modern search. Despite the passage of nearly 8 decades, the search for answers to these World War II mysteries continues with renewed vigor thanks to advances in technology and changes in government transparency policies. Satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and sophisticated metal detection equipment have opened new possibilities for locating physical evidence that was impossible to find using the technology available in the immediate post-war period. Amateur researchers and professional historians have formed networks dedicated to investigating specific cases, sharing information, and coordinating search efforts across international boundaries. The internet has made it possible to connect witnesses, relatives, and researchers who might never have found each other during the pre-digital era, leading to new discoveries and previously unknown connections between different mysteries. Archaeological techniques developed for other purposes have been adapted for investigating World War II disappearances, with some promising results. Ground surveys in areas where convoys or aircraft vanished have revealed anomalies that warrant further investigation, though funding for extensive excavation efforts remains limited. Perhaps most significantly, generational changes in government personnel have led to a somewhat more open attitude toward declassifying historical documents. Officials who were personally involved in maintaining wartime secrecy have retired or passed away, making it easier for younger administrators to approve the release of information that was once considered too sensitive for public disclosure. However, the passage of time has also created new obstacles for investigators. Witnesses have died, physical evidence has deteriorated, and landscapes have been altered by development and natural processes. Each year that passes makes it less likely that definitive answers will ever be found for many of these cases. The implications for history. These unsolved mysteries of World War II force us to confront uncomfortable questions about the reliability of historical narratives and the completeness of our understanding of the past. If events as significant as the disappearance of entire military units can occur without leaving sufficient evidence for resolution, what other aspects of the war might we be misunderstanding or overlooking entirely? The existence of these mysteries suggests that the conventional history of World War II, while accurate in its broad outlines, may be missing crucial details that would change our understanding of how the conflict was fought and won. The possibility that advanced technologies, secret operations, or even unknown phenomena played roles in the war's outcome raises questions about whether we truly comprehend the factors that determined its result. For historians and educators, these cases represent both a challenge and an opportunity. They remind us that historical knowledge is always incomplete and that new evidence can emerge to challenge established narratives. They also demonstrate the importance of maintaining skeptical inquiry and avoiding the assumption that all significant questions about the past have already been answered. The mysteries also highlight the complex relationship between military necessity and historical truth. The secrecy that was essential for winning the war has in many cases prevented us from fully understanding what occurred during those crucial years. The tension between security requirements and the public's right to know continues to shape how these stories are told and investigated. The enduring questions. As we conclude our exploration of these chilling World War II mysteries, we're left with fundamental questions that may never be fully answered. Did these disappearances result from advanced technology that was successfully concealed from history? Were they the product of intelligence operations so secret that even their existence remains classified? Or do they represent encounters with phenomena that lie beyond our current scientific understanding? The pattern of complete disappearances without physical evidence suggests either an extraordinary level of technological sophistication or the involvement of forces that operate according to principles we don't yet comprehend. The consistency of witness testimonies across different cases and theatres of operation makes it difficult to dismiss these incidents as simple cases of equipment failure or human error. Perhaps most troubling is the possibility that some of these mysteries involve deliberate cover-ups by military and intelligence organizations that continue to this day. The persistent classification of relevant documents and the pattern of evidence destruction suggests that powerful institutions have made conscious decisions to keep certain aspects of World War II hidden from public scrutiny. The human dimension of these mysteries, the families still searching for answers, the communities that lost members without explanation, The military units that were forced to continue operations while wondering what had happened to their missing comrades reminds us that these aren't just intellectual puzzles, but real tragedies that continue to cause pain and uncertainty. What we can say with certainty is that World War II was far more complex and mysterious than the standard historical accounts suggest. Behind the familiar narratives of battles won and lost, of clear lines between good and evil, lies a shadow history filled with inexplicable events and unanswered questions. These mysteries serve as a reminder that even our most studied and documented historical events still harbor secrets that challenge our understanding of what was possible during humanity's darkest hour. Whether these secrets will ever be fully revealed depends on the willingness of governments to declassify remaining documents, the dedication of researchers to continue investigating these cases, and perhaps most importantly, the possibility that new evidence will emerge to shed light on events that have remained hidden for nearly 8 decades. Until then, these chilling, unsolved mysteries of World War II will continue to haunt our understanding of history and remind us that the truth about the past may be far stranger and more complex than we ever imagined. The shadows of those desperate years still stretch across our modern world, carrying with them the echoes of vanished voices and the weight of secrets that time itself seems reluctant to reveal. In the end, these mysteries stand as monuments to all those who disappeared without explanation during humanity's greatest conflict, their stories serving as eternal questions mark against the assumption that we truly understand the full scope of what occurred during those dark and terrible years when the impossible became reality and the unthinkable became fact.